Hi, and welcome back to PDA Dad UK. In this episode, we're going to be looking at the specifics of screen time and how they affect specifically autistic or neurodiverse kids, and what we can do to help support them with screen time, make it work for them, but also how we can make sure that it's not working against them. So yes, welcome back to PDA Dad UK. Before we go any further, please can you go hop over, hit like, hit subscribe, and ring the bell so that you know when new content's coming up. We've got a lot of great stuff coming up, including some interviews and lots more informative videos like this one. So, screen time. Screen time is something that I keep seeing pop up, and it's something that I've paid particular interest in because especially for my daughter, both my kids, my son is neurotypical, my daughter obviously is autistic with PDA, SPD, and a string of other three-letter acronyms that follow. And screen time plays an important part in the day-to-day life we have. There's a lot of controversy that goes around screen time, what it is and how it can affect our kids. So we're going to unpack that a little bit. And we're going to look specifically at, there's been recent developments which show that screen time can actually really benefit specifically autistic and neurodiverse kids. There's a reason for that. We're going to unpack that and look at that, but also look at how we can make it work so that it's not having an adverse effect at the same time. So what is screen time? Screen time obviously is the time that we spend in front of a screen. So for my kids, it can be TV, it could be tablet time, it can be on the phone, it can be playing PlayStation or Xbox or any games like that. Anything which involves sitting in front of a screen. The problem that we have with screens now is that, particularly with newer technologies where we've got flat screen technology and it's LCD, LED, all these different, again, three-letter acronyms that pop out of the screen. But what they emit is something called blue light. Now, blue light's really, really interesting. We've discussed it in more detail over on the article we did on sleep health and melatonin. The link is in the description. Please do go check that out. It's really useful if you're having issues with nighttime sleep patterns and getting rest. But basically, the summary of it is that these screens emit blue light. Now, blue light is how our brains sense when we're shifting from day mode to night mode. So it's actually where the brain starts telling our body, it's time to go to sleep soon. And it's not a way of putting us to sleep, but it tells our body it's time to kicks off what are called circadian rhythms and actually clicks into when we need to go to sleep and when it's time to do that. Obviously, it's related to sunlight, so the more the sun fades, we slip into that sleep mode or that night mode, if you like, so that we can get some rest. The problem that we have with screens like iPads, tablets, phones, TVs now is that they emit a blue light. And that tricks our brain. So when we're getting too much input later at night of blue light, it can prevent us from getting to sleep. Now, there are filters and stuff like that you can actually, glasses you can get as well, which filter out blue light. There are, Apple have it built in. I think a lot of Android devices do now as well, where blue light is reduced. You can get filters. There are apps which you can put on which basically prevent blue light from being emitted. You'll see more of a red tone. But what that does is allow us to look at our screens without being so bombarded by blue light, and it actually allows us to go to sleep effectively. So making sure that kids aren't using tablets and electronic devices at night is really important. But there's a lot of controversy that goes around how much time our kids should be spending on screens in the daytime. Now, there are some very good articles on that, and you can go Google them. There's a lot of options out there and a lot of good advice basically depicting what we need to do and how long our kids should be spending on tablets. But for neurodiverse kids, and especially for kids who are autistic, screen time actually has a real benefit that goes beyond what would be for a neurotypical child. Now, the reason for this is that autistic kids, neurodiverse people in general, often thrive on routine and predictability. And social interactions are a good example of where that can be a real challenge. So in social situations, it can be incredibly anxious time for autistic people. They can find people are unpredictable. What's going to be said is unpredictable. What's going to be done is unpredictable. The reason that a lot of autistic people really do engage with gaming, really do engage with screen times and things like YouTube, TV shows, and they'll often watch the same thing over and over or play the same thing over and over. My daughter, she has a specific list of games that she really enjoys, and Roblox being one of them, but she'll often go to the same games within Roblox. So she'll find hobbies or she'll find particular worlds that she really likes. And the reason behind this is actually that there's a predictability to what's going on. She is in control. Now, we've discussed pathological demand avoidance and the need for control, and it really plays into that. But with autism and neurodiversity in general, that routine and that predictability is so much less anxious, so much less stress-inducing. And so they can find a real safety within playing games, within interacting with YouTube and things like that. I've noticed that the sort of shows my kids both like actually on YouTube are often these ones with families that are doing sort of crazy, wacky things or whatever. But there's always there's a routine to the whole thing. It's actually, they're going to start with this, then it's going to move to this. I mean, anything like that in general. A lot of kids' TV shows follow the same thing. So Hey Dougie is one that I really like, probably because of one song that's in Hey Dougie, which I think is really good. But Hey Doug is really interesting because it always starts the same way. It starts with the kids going off to join Dougie at the whatever the thing is they call it, the like Cub Scouts type thing that they're a part of. Then there's always something new to learn and a badge associated with it, and then they go through getting the badge and then they get the badge at the end. It's all very neatly concise. Another great example, and it's one my son loves, is ScoobyDoo. Both my kids love ScoobyDoo and I love ScoobyDoo as well. But you look at any ScoobyDoo episode of almost any generation of ScoobyDoo there's been so many different versions that have come out, but they all follow essentially the same exact plot. There's that they've arrived at some place, a mystery is presented, they go about solving the mystery, and in the solving of the mystery, it's always the same thing. They'll split up, they'll go and look for everything, they'll get clues. They'll come to a point where they just decide, and Shaggy and Scooby will always be attacked by the monster or ghost or whatever it is that's after them. There'll always be a point where they come up with some elaborate plan to get away from them. Then there will be the point where they're almost giving up and they're all sitting there talking, and one thing will happen. It'll be like, that's the answer. They'll go and they'll unmask it. And it's always somebody who's out for money or out for revenge or something like that, and then they'll say something along the lines of, I would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for you meddling kids, and it's over. That is predictability, and there's a knowledge there that when you go in and watch a Scooby-Doo episode, that is exactly what you're going to get. For games as well, like things like obstacle courses and stuff like that are in Roblox are so interesting to watch as my kids play them, because they get better and better and better at them. And there's a real comfort in knowing, I know what to do here, I know what to do there. And for that reason, so many times I've seen my kids both play the same obstacle courses over and over, but particularly with my daughter, she will gravitate towards things that she's done before because there's a safety and a knowledge that what she's doing is right, and there's no anxiety that accompanies it. There can be anxiety that accompanies it if it's frustrating, if it's a particularly difficult section, but we all get that. I know so many times that I've nearly thrown my controller at the television when I've been playing a racing game or something like that, and you're hitting the same corner or, any of those kind of things. Shoot 'em games are dreadful for me because I'm useless at them, and if they're multiplayer, I always pop up, get shot within 15 seconds of actually appearing, and then I've got to sit out for the whole thing and get back on with it. Very, very frustrating. Hence why I don't play those games very often anymore. There is just this safety that comes with it, and it can be really, really beneficial for autistic and neurodiverse kids, and adults alike actually, to spend more time in screen time because it is actually helping them. And we've noticed this with the specifics of when my daughter is particularly anxious, when her behaviours are really starting to show, and we can tell we're going to head to a meltdown soon or some challenging behaviours of some description. Oftentimes, go get your tablet, go and sit down and just play the game. And we see that can be something that really brings her from the edge of meltdown to a manageable level of anxiety. And we've discussed before, there's always that anxiety there, but it's bringing it to a manageable level where they're able to cope with it and get through. Tablets, games, TV shows that are familiar, all these things can be a real benefit for our kids. And it's important to let them do that. And it's a controversial thing. A lot of people are very against too much tablet time and stuff like that. I would have been one of them only a matter of years ago. I'd have said it's not a healthy thing. So there are 3 types of screen time that you can look at. The first is active screen time. Now this is usually with the games. It's where you are interacting with the screen in an active way. So you're actually playing the game, you are controlling the character, you are controlling the car, you are deciding what takes place within the world that you are in on that screen. The second type is passive screen time. Now, passive screen time is when you're not interacting directly with what's on the screen. So this is things like TV shows, YouTube, anything like that. It's a familiar world. It's something you can predict and you can have a safety in, but it's not something you are controlling. So you haven't got a character that you're moving about. That is passive screen time. The third type is educational, and this can be really useful if you can tap into this. Educational screen time really does help because it's something that we can use the positives that go along with screen time and interacting with devices and use it in an educational manner. So how do we establish screen time with our kids? This can be a challenge because there can be a feeling of a right to it, and it's important to have a routine established. Now, for a lot of autistic people and neurodiverse people in general, there is a real need for a strong routine anyway. But having something that is these are allotted times for screen time can be really beneficial. But I found the need to be flexible with that as well, that when we're moving out of when we traditionally have screen time, if there is a reason to continue with it, or if there is something, if it's not screen time, allotted time, but there's a need to introduce it in simply because of anxieties and seeing challenging behavior starting to kick in, then that's a flexibility that we have in place. Go and sit down with your tablet, and then we put a time limit on it. Go and sit with it for 10, 15 minutes. Just go and calm yourself down, have some fun, and then we can come back to this or whatever the case may be, and we can follow it up with that. There's also rewarding positive behavior with screen time. Screen time can be a great reward for many things. Now, I avoid the idea of punishment. We tend to stick with rewarding positive behavior and not recognizing negative behaviors. That can be really difficult. There are obviously times where we have to kick in. If things have got violent or aggressive, then I had to intervene physically, and that in itself is a form of punishment because my daughter hates it. I hate it. It's horrible for everybody. However, it's necessary for the safety of my whole family. The difference is that we can use positive things. So when we see something positive, that's an extra 5 minutes of screen time you've got. That's an extra 5 minutes on the tablet. Rewards are so useful in these situations, and screen time can be a really positive reward. One danger that I am particularly aware of, because of myself, funnily enough, in this, is the need to make sure that there's still exercise taking place. And I've seen this happen before. There can be an addictive quality to gaming and to screens. And for myself, I know I was, funny enough, we were talking about this on the Grumpy Dads on the last episode, and it was what habit would you put in earlier in your life if you could go back and do it? And one of those is the need for exercise and continuing to exercise. I went through a dramatic weight loss because I'd got so huge. Now, there was medical reasons for that as well, but I was very big and I lost a lot of weight. And I found the gym to be a place that I feared and hated previously. I found it to be a place that I can really go, and it's some me time and it's positive time that I can use. The need for exercise is really important, and we know this for my daughter from a behavioural perspective. If she doesn't get out of the house, if she's not active in some way, then she goes stir crazy. She gets cabin fever like no one I've ever known. And come rain, hail or shine, we know that we need to get out of the house quite regularly. Every day we need to make sure there's something that takes place outside of the house. Otherwise, we're going to get challenging behaviour. So yesterday was a really good example of this because it was a day where it was just pouring with rain. Trying to find something in the midst of everything being shut down with lockdown and all that kind of stuff has been so difficult. And we ended up spending the most of the day in the home. And my daughter's behaviours by the end of the day marked that mix of boredom, frustration, and just seeing the same four walls. She needs that variety. It's not the same for every kid, but it's really important to ensure that you're factoring in exercise and making sure that's taking place. And again, screen time can be the reward. So we're going to go out for half an hour to the park, and if you manage that and you do a good job, then when we get home, you've earned yourself 30 minutes of screen time, something along those lines. Using it as a reward is fantastic to ensure that that activity is taking place as well. And I mean, exercise goes beyond just the need to be out and about. Exercise triggers certain chemicals in the brain that actually elevate our mood, and it's so important that we are engaging that. It's the body's natural way of dealing with depression and low feelings and anxiety. A bit of exercise, suddenly you've got the endorphins that are going through your body, the adrenaline, and it can make things just so much more manageable in the long run. So what can be the benefits of screen time for our kids, specifically our neurodiverse kids? One is obviously that managing the anxiety, and it really does help with that, as we've already said a few times. It can really help with managing the anxiety and the stress that's coming in, and it's a safe world that they can enter into, that they can control, and it will reduce that anxiety. By the same token, another real advantage is that you can factor in education. Now, we found this during the first lockdown, the really hard lockdown that we went through, and we were having to educate at home. That was a real challenge. But what we found was that once we'd engaged with some online learning opportunities, and actually Roblox and Minecraft both had some educational games added in. So they were including things like mathematics and English, and they were turning it into a game form, and we found that so useful. We got a lot of advantage to using games that they love in a way that was educational and really benefiting them, and it was a reward as well. So we were kind of getting the best of both. We were doing the, once we'd done, we were keeping it to 15-minute intervals. So if we do 15 minutes of English with you now, sit down and let's go through some stuff like that, and then your reward is you can play this game. And we made it quite specific. This is the game you can play. So my daughter would hop on after that, and she'd have great fun with this game. And what it was actually doing, reinforcing what we'd already been teaching. And the benefits were fantastic. There are so many great educational opportunities out there, and all you have to do is Google educational games, or whatever search engine you prefer. Hit the search engine, have a look for educational games, and even educational games for autistic kids. There are so many things that pop up, and there are so many things that are out there, and there's a lot of free games as well. And as I say, things like Roblox, you just have to look in Roblox under their search thing of educational games, and there will be levels and stuff that pop up that you can use to make it educational. So it actually has a better benefit than simply just being to take some time or to help manage the anxieties that are there. That, of course, triggers into, you're going to get an increase of knowledge. So by using educational games, you can learn so much more. But even without educational games, I think the dexterity that a lot of the games use, and there's a thought process anyway. So as I say, my daughter loves the obstacle courses, or obbies they call them on Roblox. And they're great because they're problem solving. It's how do you get across this part? How do you manage this? And it can be quite tricky. I get completely flummoxed on them. But they can be really educational, and they can really increase knowledge on that without it being something that is specifically educational. Just the fact that there are these problem-solving situations in there have made such a difference. And we've been able to apply that too. It's like, so what happened when you did that? You took your step back and you had a look around and you found a slot. So how can we use that now? What are you looking at here, and what can we do to achieve whatever we're trying to achieve? So we're taking the example of the game and using it in a real life situation. The other big thing, and this is something that I really have noticed, is that my daughter is more social on gaming and stuff like that. She will get into conversations. Now that immediately leads into a danger as well. I'm hyper aware of the dangers that come on looking on any social media, but games as well, where there's chat options and the people that get in there. And we had a situation with one of my admins on my group on Facebook for parents of autistic kids, and she'd had somebody who was clearly moving into trying to be grooming her son. She was straight on it and dealt with it, and it was all reported and dealt with effectively. But I'm very aware of the dangers that can come in there. And I think there are sometimes dangers that we don't think about as well. And it's something that came up is that my daughter made a friend who was a few years older than her, and he was younger mentally, but obviously physically and developmentally was advanced. So I had to be very cautious with monitoring the conversation to ensure that she wasn't getting into a situation where inappropriate things were being requested or said. Nothing happened. It was fantastic. I'm really glad to say that. But it's something I'm hyper aware of, and we do need to be aware of with screen time. There are a lot of apps that help you with this. And there comes a controversy. Some people think, well, you need to give them the freedom and all that kind of stuff. For me personally, I'm not dismissing that as an argument, but my daughter's safety, as far as getting into situations where she could find herself in danger, are far more important. And it may seem like I'm being overbearing as a father, but for me, I'd rather be an overbearing father with a safe daughter than the other scenario where I haven't paid attention and then something bad happens, photos get out there, whatever. You don't know. There are a lot of apps that are available on both iOS, Apple, and Android, which allow you to monitor remotely what's going on your tablets. They can be expensive, but there are cheaper options out there as well. For us, I just keep everything pretty tightly locked down, so I don't have to be standing over her shoulder, but she can't access things. But it's when it comes to things like chats in games, I'm very aware. Keep an eye, because it is so important. Another issue that can come from too much screen time is that it can actually flip over and create more anxiety and click into depression. And that's because, again, we talked about the lack of activity. We need to make sure we're being physically active, and our kids are being physically active as well. However, sometimes in games, if there's a frustration, I see this in my daughter, if there's something she can't do, that's when we get a meltdown. If she's on an obstacle course and there's a bit that's just really challenging and she's doing it and doing, you can see the tension rise, and that's the point where we have to go, let's play a different game and come back to that, or let's come off the tablet for a bit, let's go and have a run around in the garden, hop on the trampoline, do something that's going to help you to just get away from this mindset for a little bit. Something that can happen is that kids can become quite reclusive when they're too involved with gaming and devices. They'll hide up in the room and that's all they spend their time doing. Another big thing, if your kids are on any kind of chat apps and stuff like that, they present a real danger in that cyberbullying is a big thing. And for our kids in particular, I think they're often more susceptible to bullying. And from purely the perspective, when I see this in my daughter, she takes everything very much to heart. I think we all do in general. But for her, there's that literal thing. She doesn't understand necessarily that someone's just being a bully. She'll talk about bullying a lot and not being bullied. But she doesn't really understand that being a bully means that they're probably making things up and they're just saying something that will try to hurt you. She can't separate that fiction from reality in a way. We don't allow chat apps on their tablets and stuff like that. We've kept that something exclusive, but the point's going to come where that's going to be necessary for her social life as well. She needs friends and she needs to be able to communicate with friends. But for now, we've got that locked down. It's something that I don't want to see happening, and I want to prepare her for it as we come to it and understanding how to deal with it. And that leads into the contact we can have with inappropriate things. Now, we're in an era now where everything's available on the internet at the click of a button. Now you see, are you 18 and over? Yes, no. Who's going to click no? Kids are going to click yes. Everybody's going to click yes because they want to see what's on the next screen. It's almost like a red flag to a bull. I really dislike the systems that we've got in place. I'm not a prude and I'm not someone who advocates for lots of censorship. However, our kids' minds are very malleable and these are their formative years, and it's really important that, for me personally, I'm keeping my kids safe from that. So again, I've got child-safe browsers, I've got all that kind of stuff built in so that they can't just go hop on and stumble onto something inaccurate. A lot of service providers now, so BT we're with, they actually have a built-in system where they have an automatic filter that's on the internet. So no matter what device you're using, who's got it, if it's adult content, stuff like that, it's blocked. You can get that activated really easily just by calling your provider. One other big issue that can come up is problems with attention and learning outside of the game or outside of the tablet environment. It can be a real issue, particularly for people with ADHD and stuff like that, because we were talking to Alan last week on the Grumpy Dads and we were talking about ADHD. And for him with the ADHD, if the dopamine's not being kicked in, it just doesn't matter. It doesn't get the attention it requires. When we become addicted to technologies and gaming and stuff like that, that dopamine's being present, but it can also reduce over time, and it's really important that we attack that and ensure that's not happening, which is why screen time limits are so important. So to summarize, basically, there are real advantages to screen time, and factoring it in with our kids can be a really beneficial thing, especially if we have neurodiverse kids, or we have autistic kids or ADHD kids, anything like that. That can be a real benefit. It's factoring it in a healthy way. So taking into account the potential dangers that are there, but looking at the positives and how we can enhance them as well. It's going to be different for every family as well. And I think this is really important. We tend to put a blanket over these things and say everything is, has to be a certain way. And work out what works for your family, what is going to benefit your family the most. Being flexible with the times and stuff like that is something that's really worked for us and may really work for you. Having established routines of it may really help you. In some cases, may not. So with PDA, that routine can actually be inhibiting in some ways. If it's like it's time to come off now, that's a demand. And we have to work around that. We have to make sure that doesn't occur. That's really all I wanted to say. I'd love to hear your feedback. If you've had any positive or negative experiences on tablet time, on screen time, please do put it in the comments. I'd like to hear the feedback and what experience people have had. Please let me know what routines have benefited you and what methods and techniques of bringing this into your little world have done. And again, positive and negative, I really want to hear about it. Put it in the comments because it's fascinating and it's something I can put into a further episode. Please do like this, please do subscribe and hit the bell so that you know when new content's coming on. As I said before, loads of good stuff coming up, and you don't want to miss it. So please do click on all those. In the meantime, I'll see you guys in the next episode. Stay safe and have fun.